Today I have with me Ashima Chowdhury here to talk about some of her incredible work in reviving millets in the country. And she also helped run the Odisha Millets Mission within the government of Odisha.
Odisha Millet Mission is one of the scheme which had government, civil society, and academics, like all three as equal partners from the beginning itself. So the design of the program was very consultative. In that process, we realized for uplands and medium lands, millets are the most viable production systems.
Okay.
And how the design should be to create a millet supporting program, that is what became ultimately Odisha Millet Mission.
So now we think of ragi or bajra or something else as nutritional, high fiber foods.
Yeah, something which can actually break us out of this diabetes scenarios in terms of health, and which are the most possible form of feeding the whole population also, and then providing nutrition also. I think they are very, very viable solution. The Hockey World Cup in 2018, that's where I think our success came, because in that we had put a stall, and then our ragi sandwich became the talk of for people who were coming recurring time watching matches and all. Like word of the mouth, they started saying that, go with this place and have sandwich. Something which can also help us do climate change, mitigation, help us really battle whole of that, like drought and those scenarios also. So they are so robust, resilient. So they seem to be coming across as one of the best options right now to make sure that we have enough nutritious food and the crops which we can actually grow.
Right. Welcome to the Well Lab show, where we try to learn more about water, environment, land, and livelihoods. I'm Pavan Srinath. Every 2 weeks, we'll sit with some of our colleagues at Well Labs or talk to some of our wonderful partners and learn more about the science, the systems, and the stories around complex environmental and social issues. Let's get started. Hi, and welcome to the Well Labs YouTube channel. I'm Pavan Srinath. Today, I have with me Ashima Chowdhury, who's managing partner of the Rural Futures program at Well Labs. We're here to talk about some of her incredible work in reviving millets in the country, both cultivation as well as consumption. Before joining Well Labs, Ashima worked for over a decade in Odisha to help revive millets over there. And she also helped run the Odisha Millets Mission within the government of Odisha. Ashima, welcome to the YouTube channel.
Thank you.
I know it's your first time here, and I know that we are fairly new in recording and putting out these videos. But Ashima, I've heard of millets a lot. Then we talk about ragi and bajra and some of these individual millets. But help us understand what are millets in general before we get into the millet mission and the success there.
Actually, millets are grains, but then they were classified as pseudo grains earlier.
Okay.
Like they're part of grasses
Hmm.
which we are consuming. So all the grains are.
They're all grasses of
They
different
all are
types.
grasses, and then we have, based on the evolution and science and the agriculture science, we have improved some of them and worked on them. Actually, grown them enough time to change their, some of the behavior. So rice and paddy became like that, and millets are now becoming one of them. Uh, and at least in Asian context, and then some of the African context, millets were probably the most historic, like the prehistoric time period grains which people were consuming.
Right.
But then all these places got colonized. They all became pseudo crops,
Okay.
pseudo cereals. They
So
are,
these are all just inferior options.
yeah, yeah. And then I think there was also a clash in terms of in the landscapes millets were growing, mostly uplands and medium lands or slopy lands. And I think before, like Green Revolution, also those lands were probably suited for tea, coffee, plantations, and also every, like they thought that these crops are not,
They're not real crops.
they're not real crops, production is bad, and then people did not see any value in promoting any of that, until unless we realized that they're nutri-cereals. And
Okay.
then the whole evolution happened. Like
So now we think of ragi or bajra or something else as nutritional, high fiber foods.
yeah, something which can actually break us out of this diabetes scenarios in terms of health, and which are the most possible form of feeding the whole population also, and then providing nutrition also. I think they are
Right.
very, very viable solution. And something which can also help us do climate change, mitigation, help us really battle, whole of that, like drought and those scenarios also. So they are so robust, resilient. So they seem to be coming across as one of the best options right
Okay.
now to feed, like to make sure that we have enough food, nutritious food, and then which and the crops which we can actually grow.
Right. And what you're also saying is that I think wheat was first domesticated in, I don't know, the Fertile Crescent, right? Uh, and came out of there, and then wheat spread to Europe, spread to Asia, and then rice. I think there are stories of first being cultivated perhaps in China. Some stories are out of India, and then it spread out from there. And basically, it's from similar times. We're talking, say, 3000 BC, older, whatever that.
Maybe sometimes 10,000 BC also, like millets, like when we see millets, like go back and
Mm.
uh, see the traces, then they can be records roughly like
Right.
around 10,000.
So they've existed in parallel
Yeah.
across at least tropical regions for a long time.
Yes.
But they've not quite gotten the credit
Yeah.
that, I mean, like all of Europe is wheat, and then you make bread of various kinds with
Yeah.
wheat.
Yeah.
And I think rice is not just India, but India, Southeast Asia,
Whole
China,
yeah.
etc. And you have the story of corn from South America. And I mean, reading up for this discussion, I even found that actually maize or corn is more closely related to the other millets than to, say, rice and wheat.
Yeah.
But again, it was selectively bred in a different way. The kernels became so big.
Yeah.
And today's American sweet corn is its own beast, right?
Yeah,
Very
that's
different from Indian maize as we knew even like 10 or 20 years ago. And what we might still have as butta or other things. So, okay, so millets have always existed, kind of been seen in an inferior manner. But before we go ahead, just help us understand which millet is what. Because we hear some finger millet, little millet, I hear some ragi bajra, and then we'll hear some name in Kannada or Telugu or Odia, and I'm never confident of which is which. So, break that down for us.
So, generally, we divide millets into two categories. One is major millets. In major millets, we say ragi, jawar, and bajra. These
Okay.
three. And these three will be named like like jawar, bajra.
What are they in English?
Ragi is finger millet.
Hmm.
Jawar is sorghum, and bajra is pearl millet.
Okay.
And these three, why they are called, like they are called major millets, because their sizes are little bigger than other millets. One of the reason, and they are naked grains, so you don't have to hull them to eat.
Oh, they come as is. So it's
They come as is. You
okay.
thresh them and then you just clean, and then you can make powder out of it, like a flour out of it, and then
Or
consume
it as is.
or consume as it is. You can you can soak them and then grind them, make something out of it, or you can make broken uh, things out of it, like a broken jawar and bajra can be made into some khichdi or other items, but you don't have to hull them. There's no layer, an inedible layer above.
So in
All
that
three of
sense,
them.
they're quite different from rice, which has a husk.
So they're very close to wheat, because wheat also we don't have to hull to eat. We have to only roast it.
You only hull it if you want maida instead of atta.
Yeah, if you want to remove fiber, then you can you it's not called hulling, it's called polishing. So you remove the outer layer, and then you get only that inner the soft part. So
Okay. So those are the major millets. Ragi, bajra,
and jowar.
jowar. Okay. There are other names for ragi, jowar, bajra, right?
So like sajje
For bajra.
for pearl millet,
Hmm.
and for
Sajay, I think, is in Kannada, perhaps in
in
Telugu.
Telugu, yeah, these areas, and then most of the country it's called bajra only. Like if you go to north also it's bajra, and if you go to Gujarat and Maharashtra also people call it bajra. And there are two three kind of varieties in that. Some varieties which are more used for fodder, some are more tasty and then used for roti in those parts of the things. And then ragi is most common, at least in some parts of central India where people are calling it ragi, but then in Marathi it's called nachani. In Odia it's called mandia. In north it's called madua. So if you go to Bihar, Jharkhand, UP, it's called madua.
Okay.
I'm not very sure if it is what is called in Kannada.
I've grown up calling it ragi.
Ragi,
I'm
yeah.
sure there's another.
I'm assuming ragi name comes because it's very popular as ragi. Otherwise, the English name is finger millet.
Right.
Yeah.
So before we get to the minor millets, the three major millets, where are they roughly grown?
Across country, I think ragi is very common in eastern parts and southern part.
Okay.
Any part you go, you'll find some dishes out of it. People have consumed. There's a very distinct memory, at least in the generation, like our parents' generation, that they have consumed as children. Some dishes in their childhood.
Here in Karnataka, I mean, ragi mudde is the archetypical farmer's meal.
I think one of the traditional cuisines, like if somebody has to like recommend somebody what to eat as a Kannada meal, then I think ragi mudde and some chicken curry or something will be one of that.
And growing up, there were things like, you take ragi powder, mix it with some milk, a little bit of sugar, and then you have it as a little slurry.
Yeah.
Or
Porridge.
some porridge, or you'd make ragi dosa or roti. So I think southern Karnataka, I think ragi has been
Ragi
the
is very
primary
popular.
millet.
Western part has jawar and bajra more, including even in Maharashtra, we'll see jawar bajra bhakri is like very very common thing, which is made mostly by jawar or bajra. Same you'll find rotla or rotli, those chota rotis, and then thick ones are in Gujarati food, in Rajasthani food. Even in Punjab, Haryana, those places which are roti eating places, wheat was introduced in PDS, I think.
Right, in ration shops.
In ration shops, people used to have wheat rotis occasionally and millet rotis on the most of the days. Like
Okay.
that.
So Ashima, you were saying that the bajra and jowar are grown in sort of western parts of India, but that also comes over to like North Karnataka. I think there's a good amount of bajra and jowar that is being grown. Right?
So that's the continuation of that west, and like geographically, if you see arid, semi-arid, those places. And yeah, I think it's not like you will not find any jowar bajra in east, but proportion and majority and even the cultural consumption will be more.
Okay. So that was the major millets. What about the minor millets?
So we have many minor millets. In that, I think majority is little millet, which is same, sama.
Okay.
Like any of these names you will call across country. And then foxtail millet, which is mostly Kangani and Rala in some places.
Okay.
Yeah, these two names I know. But then
What is Navane?
Navane would be maybe proso or foxtail.
Okay.
One of that. So in minor millets, we have like little millet, foxtail millet, proso millet, kodo millet. Kodo is kodo in majority of the place. I have never found any other name for it. And then brown top now. So and yeah, so these are the majority of the millets available. In that also proportion would be highest for little millet.
Okay.
And after that foxtail millet. But these are still relatively smaller in terms of the acreage it used to be grown. Consumption wise, I think across country will find it.
Some amount.
Some amount, yeah.
And
then this is also that vrat ka food. Upvas mein people used to eat. Like if you go to Maharashtra, then people eat a lot of little millet as now I'm forgetting the name. But then this is a vrat khana. Like
right. So
everybody
while
buys.
fasting, while doing ritual fasts,
Yeah.
you have this instead of traditional grains.
Yeah.
But so and you were saying also that with major millets that they don't have an outer layer, but most of the minor millets have that outer layer.
Yes.
Okay.
Not most, all of them have. So
Okay.
they are they become rice varieties. Like you thresh them and then you hull them, and that is where we used to have traditional hullers, like hand pounded hullers, dheki. If you go to east, then you'll find that dheki thing, which is a small hole, like a stone kind of thing, and then you have one wood kind of thing going and beating it, and then you cleaning it, and then that's how it used to be. consumed. And one reason that we don't have the decline of these millets, because we did not have processing units for these millets. And then every time you want to consume it, you have to do hand processing for it. And
Right.
when more and more people started going out and working out, they stopped. They had no time to
Right.
process them at home. And then you'll process maybe 1-2 kgs for your upavas or some festival, some kheer and all you'll make. But then day to day, you'll be like, okay, fine, I'll have rice.
So, so is it fair to say that the decline of these millets largely happened when we had large scale sort of wheat and rice production
Yeah.
kicking off in India?
Yeah.
The Green Revolution, post-Green Revolution. So, so cut to when you were, say, when you were working in Odisha over the, say, between 2008, 2010, and like now, what was the prevailing attitudes around millets over there?
Odisha still had millets. I think other places, like I come from UP, there are no millets. Like I don't think so. When I was growing up, I saw any millets. I have, like when I started working on millets, I went back and asked my grandmother and grandparents that do you know these crops? And they were like, yeah, it was there. But then in my whole childhood, I had never seen anything related to millets. So similar attitude was there in Odisha also. People will be like, this is poor person's food. If I don't have anything else to eat, then maybe I'll eat millets. Or like occasionally for some festival or some fast or something like that. Otherwise, in tribal areas, people were growing and consuming, but it had also reduced a lot.
Okay. So before anything, what can you give us a sense of like the scale of production that exists before any intervention when it was like this?
So that number would be like relatively higher for Odisha. Even when before Odisha millet mission came, at least say for like 1 lakh hectare, 1.5 lakh hectare was grown under millets in Odisha. But then if you see that number from like 50 years back, it would be like 60% decline.
Okay.
I- and I'm giving example of Odisha because most of the Odisha, like except coastal districts, which would be like roughly 8-9 districts, rest of the districts are not suitable for a lot of paddy consumption, like paddy cultivation. Only the low-lying areas in those,
Right. You have a lot of rolling hills, lots of
yes,
valleys and
yes,
peaks and so on.
undulating landscapes. So medium land and uplands are suitable only for millets.
It's
And then,
only at the valley that you can have sort of standing water. You
yes,
can block a small
yes.
stream and then you can flood fields.
Or you do this that
Right.
terracing of some of the places, but then those are also not possible in all kind of landscapes. Maybe Koraput is suitable for it, some other smaller places are suitable, but then other places are not suitable for even terracing because you don't have that much of soil depth for you to terrace and then block water and
Okay. So
grow.
people were still growing. But from what I understand, the way in which, say, ragi was grown or other millets was grown, you were not. It was not the most productive of crops,
Yeah.
right? So how did that? What was the traditional method of planting these? And uh, when you started looking at how to revive millets, how did people start rethinking this?
Yeah. So I think one other reason was when green, like, so if we understand how productivity of wheat and rice increased, it increased because we created a whole package around it. High yielding varieties, lot of varieties got released, and then training, and then the packages of chemical
The fertilizers.
fertilizers, and then the whole package. And then also the whole country shifted for paddy from broadcasting to transplanting.
Right.
That's also learned behavior.
Tell us more about broadcasting versus
So
transplant.
broadcasting is when you just throw your seed or directly sow. Like mostly broadcasting is you just throw. Like a
Right.
farmer goes and throws the seed, and then seed abruptly grows. There's no spacing maintained. There's no weeding, mechanized weeding possible. You have to go and pick it up in
Right.
between, but then there's no spacing between one seedling to another seedling. So in Green Revolution and other times, people learn this behavior, this agronomic practice that if we transplant paddy, it gives much higher yield.
Right.
and most of the high yielding varieties respond to it very well. So that's how yield increase happened. But in millets, nothing of that sort happened. So people were still just broadcasting, and it is anyways grown on the poorest of the soil, in poorest of the condition, and without giving any additional input. Like, people don't give additional input. If they prepare land once, and at that time whatever uh, manure they put, that's all, and then they go and harvest. So
And you don't try to deweed it,
DVDing in broadcasting is a very, very difficult thing.
right?
Uh,
Because they're not evenly spaced.
they're not evenly spaced. You can't walk in between. So maybe when they are like 1 month old, you can still walk in. After that, once they've grown bigger,
Ah,
it's hard to walk in and do DVDing. So
okay. And also I'm guessing that when you do the manual transplanting, it means that sometimes some saplings will cluster together, so they'll compete for sunlight, they'll compete for the nutrients in the
Yes.
soil, and then you'll have some patches which are
some
not
patches would not have grown. Like, not every place seed will have similar level of germination. So some places, if it has not germinated, then you have a patch which is fully empty and a patch which is overgrown.
right. So you're saying in rice we switched from that to the idea that you you grow saplings and then you transplant them into it, and you transplant like a cluster of them together, or
So
there's a
you do
process there.
lines mostly, or you do 2-3 together. Some of the farmers, like, so the older practice is that you do 7-8 together, but then the system of rice intensification says you do 2 or 3, because that seedling, whatever has germinated, will grow and it will shoot more and more tillers. So more tillering means more yield.
Okay, sorry, what's artillery?
Tillers are actually how many plants. So from
Okay.
one seed, how many shoots are coming out,
Okay.
and each shoot will have some of the grain
Right.
above it. So the tillers, like, if in traditional practice you have 8 or 10 tillers, that's the capacity like rice has. In SRI you can have 60, up to 60.
Okay.
So that's how the yield increase happens.
Okay. So this has happened in rice. People went from just spraying rice, which is how you'd imagine. I mean, there's some grasses with seeds, so you grow them like grasses and you spray a certain side, and it's fine when it's subsistence, when it was long ago. But now with the idea is to grow agriculture or do agriculture such that you don't just get enough food, but that you can sell in the market.
Yeah.
Uh, so millets continue to be broadcast.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Millets, majority, even in Karnataka now also people broadcast millets.
Okay.
When Karnataka has a very good practice called Guli Ragi, which is very similar to system of rice intensification or millet intensification. You do broadcast, you do transplanting, you maintain the distance, you do weeding, and then you do the whole practice of it. But then majority of the farmers would do broadcasting.
Okay. And I guess that practice then gets diminished to, okay, you've done your primary crop, you don't have too much labor to manage a land. Instead of leaving it fallow, okay, I'll just broadcast some ragi or something, and whatever grows, I'll try and use it for odds and ends at homes. Maybe.
Or also for fodder sometimes, yes.
So, if this was the state and people also thought of this as poor food, tell us a bit about how you started. This is not just the Odisha Millets Mission, which I think has been very, very transformational, but how did you and other people in Odisha start even thinking about millets as a viable option for scaling?
Yeah. So I think our own journey was also, in a way, like how Odisha Millet Mission was designed, was part of how we learned from people what to do. So we were doing one comprehensive pilot around
And this you were doing, you were a part of the RRA, right? The Rain-Fed.
revitalizing rain-fed agriculture network. And there we were doing comprehensive pilot to come up with a differential scheme design for rain-fed areas.
Okay.
So the whole idea and the work was, Green Revolution is working well for irrigated areas or areas which are plain, flat, and alluvial soils and all that. But then there is 50% of area which doesn't fall under that. How do we come up with a differential agriculture design?
Right.
Schematic design. And that is what was called comprehensive pilots. So in that we were trying to do a lot of pilots, lot of learning, lot of evidence generation of what should be a new design. And then when we were seeing landscapes and when we were trying to understand production systems, so what production system exists, but then whether that production system is the most viable option or not, in that process we realized for uplands and medium lands, millets are the most viable production systems.
Okay.
And how the design should be to create a millet supporting program, that is what became ultimately Odisha Millet Mission. But then those were trials and errors, because we were also trying to understand if one farmer in Odisha has three kind of lands: uplands which are like 30-degree slopes or
Mm.
more than that, sometimes it is
Mm.
even further
Right.
slopey, and then medium lands which have little slope but then not as steep as uplands, and then lowlands which are almost like you can have water submerged there. So for lowlands, many kind of rice production systems were very useful. Some of the lowlands we also wanted to try that can people have fisheries and paddy together, depending on locations, and then what kind of rice production. SRI was one of that we wanted to try. But in medium land and upland, some places maybe rice is okay to have, but then pulses, millets, oil seeds are far more uh, you know superior production systems. And then because support systems don't exist, and then scheme designs are not like, no, there was no scheme, there was no program for a farmer to access if they want to go for seed or agricultural machinery, or going and selling it themselves or learning for it. Like, if okay, I am a farmer, I want to learn.
I'm trying to imagine a combine harvester going at a 30-degree slope and a
Yeah,
brain
yeah.
doesn't work.
That's what.
Yeah.
No. So there's nothing exists for them, and then they are like, okay, whatever, I'm doing, in some way. And then even if something comes up, it will come like, okay, mango plantation and cashew plantation or
And
something.
there's a bit of coffee people are
Ha,
trying it.
like in some places. But then those are not maybe options for everybody. They're okay. In some pockets you can do all of it. But then 100% farmer will not shift their all paddy or all upland and medium land to cashew. And there is a huge wait time for that tree to fully grow and then start giving you yield and all of it.
Like you don't have patient capital, right? Where you put money and invest and just sit for 5 years where you don't have to worry about income.
Yes.
Here are people who are dependent on annual income from the
Yeah,
land.
seasonal income, not like every season they have to get something out of it. So those are the things which we figured out, that
So millets and ragi in particular emerged as the
actually millets, like the ragi, the program Odisha Millet Mission is not designed for ragi. It is designed to provide support systems for all millets, and
okay.
the scheme has flexibility for a farmer to choose whatever they want to choose and still get supported.
Hmm.
So, but because Odisha, like 90% of millets in Odisha is ragi, that is why it became like very ragi oriented in some way. But if a farmer wants to grow little millet, foxtail millet, wants to grow sorghum, farmer can go and get access and sell it, and get all other ecosystem for whatever crops they want to grow.
Liking the episode so far? Hit the subscribe button on YouTube and check out more episodes of the Well Lab show. And hey, share this episode with a friend, a colleague, a student, or a fellow environmental enthusiast who might find this episode useful. We hope to reach more great people like you. So, I think in public imagination at least, we have heard a little bit, okay, there's Green Revolution and a bunch of things that happened under the name of it. On milk, for example, there was Operation Flood. So when you were thinking of, okay, we've done these pilots or we started from there and we want to promote millets across the state, how did you go about it? How did you think about it?
We did a block level pilot in some way. Like it was not covering whole block, but then when we were designing it for a block, that comprehensive
So a
pilot.
block is the same as a taluk, right?
Ha,
It's a subunit of a district.
subunit, more maybe like 15-20 panchayats, depending on population and how the geography also. Like some places you'll have very large ones and some places you'll have very small ones. Uh, so at block level, because that is the lowest administrative unit in some way above panchayat. And panchayat doesn't, like in most of the country, panchayat doesn't have their own development fund. The development funds are sitting at block. So that is how we went ahead at block level plans. So what we decided was, can we create a circular economy at block level? And that is what we wanted to like try out in the whole of the district in Malkangiri. And that is what we went and presented it to uh, Principal Secretary Agriculture at state level, and then he invited Development Commissioner uh, to to be part of that presentation. And they felt that the millet revival is mature enough to not only be in one district but can go across districts, and that is how that whole thing became Odisha Millet Mission.
And
in
this you're saying it started in Malkangiri,
Huh.
which would have, I think, just a few years before come out of a lot of internal conflicts with sort of the Indian state conflicting with Maoists and others. So this was just in that era where it was coming out of
It was
that.
there. It was not come out yet.
Oh, it was the conflict was still live.
Yeah.
Okay.
The fight between state, BSF, Maoists, Greyhounds, all that was
That was
there.
happening
That was happening.
while you were thinking, okay, how do we promote
Yes,
millets?
yes.
Okay. So you wanted to promote a circular economy. And from what I understand, when agricultural departments look at, okay, we want to promote agriculture. Okay, how do I just grow more rice or something? But was that like the focus? Was there more?
So that's where I think we also did a breakthrough, because the issue of chicken and egg in terms of first you'll do production, then you'll do consumption, or if you want to promote consumption, then you want to do production. People will be always saying this. So this is where we kind of had a breakthrough in some way, because most of the time agri department wants to only focus on yields. So they want to promote things in terms of showing that per acre what is my yield,
Right.
and then not adding other value things to it. So when we were trying to create this, we were saying that let's not think like that. Let's have multi-dimensional objectives for it. In yield will one thing which we will eventually grow, but then that's not something which we want to focus first day, because it's a lose-lose thing. Like if until unless we've created the whole ecosystem of who's going to consume it, then you grow yield, and then there's nobody to take it. So
Then prices drop.
prices were anyways low, and if you have not created the demand side of it, or where it is going to fit in, and then how do you create the whole aspiration around it? You have processing available, value addition available for all of it, because ultimately millets are grains. Humans have to consume it. It doesn't have any other utility to it.
Right.
So and their competitors are rice and wheat, which are heavily subsidized, and they are the biggest market. So you have to create some space within that system, and that has to be the whole thing. So from where seed is going to come, how farmers will access inputs, how farmers will access basic custom hiring, how they are going to have access to processing units so they can process it. You have to reduce drudgery, and then you include them in the basic large scale consumption programs, midday meals, ICDS and PDS. But then you also create a outside market for it, like urban market and household consumption market.
Okay. So you're saying that you were doing this cyclically, that generation and consumption.
Yeah.
But okay, let's just break it down. I'm really keen to learn about more of them one by one. So if you're looking at, okay, how do we go from this broadcasting to intensifying and making millets just more productive such that farmers can also earn more?
Yeah.
So how did you start going about doing that?
So what we did in program design, we did not prescribe farmers which millet to grow.
Okay.
We said you grow millets, but you adapt improved agronomic practices, and to do that you will be incentivized.
Okay.
So incentive is not for inputs. We created ecosystem for it. Farmers can go and access it. Like, so every 3-4 panchayat level there'll be one seed center, there'll be one custom hiring center for production point of view, and then bio inputs thing. But 3 of the practices were promoted. So trainings were given to farmers and then asked them to adapt any of the 3 practices. First is system of millet intensification, which is very similar to rice. It is more suited for ragi.
Okay.
Then line transplanting.
Okay.
Then line sowing. So all minor millets respond to line transplanting and line sowing. They don't respond very well to millet intensification because of they do not have the similar ability to shoot tillers.
Okay.
So if you grow them like from all side further, your yield will not increase. So you better maintain some lines, maintain some distances so they can have space and then better yield, but not so much. But ragi can shoot a lot of tillers.
Okay.
So farmers were trained for these three practices. They were provided ecosystem to go and access, and they were given 3 years incentive in their account to adapt practices.
And they could pick which of the three they wanted to do, which millet they wanted to do.
Yes.
Okay.
And each year the incentive was reducing. So first year they got 5,000 per hectare, second year they got 3,000, and then they got 2,000. So this is a 10,000 package. This is just for them to say that, okay, I adapted the practice. This is my experience out of it. So the idea was that in 3 years they would have learned it enough and had enough trial for them to accept this as a practice, and they would have seen the benefit enough for themselves, because in first year maybe for some reason crop failed, something happened.
Right.
So in a year,
So it was a bit of it was like transition insurance, right?
and then behavior, like you support them to actually do the behavioral change. That is one thing. Then, though all the practices were organic or natural in their nature, but there was no push for any certification, and there was no exclusion if any farmer put any chemical. You will still get incentive even if all the packages which were promoted had all organic and natural package of practice. There was no mention of chemical, or that was demotivated, that don't use because you had never used, why you want to contaminate now and then, and they're like by default organic. But then there was no exclusion of any farmer because they used chemical or because they wanted to do trial with chemicals or anything. So that became another layer where you were making sure that everything is more inclusionary rather than
And
exclusionary.
there's farmer choice baked in at every level.
Yes. And the third is we asked farmer to there was no requirement for farmer to show land ownership to get incentive.
Okay.
So people who were growing on forest rights, acquired land, or even if they were doing, because this is all Adivasi area, a lot of times people don't have pattas to show. So it became even further inclusionary. They had to only produce like from their village agriculture worker or panchayat person that they have done cultivation, and there were NGOs and community resource persons to certify that these many farmers have adapted this practice, and that itself was enough. There was no other certificate required for them to avail incentive.
Okay. And the traditional thing I've seen is there'll be, I think, Cuttack has this rice research institute, or you'll have these Sarkari institutes which will work. They'll create a hybrid variety of rice or wheat. We've heard of like things like Sona Masuri, other things, and then they'll go and sell these to farmers or create places. What was the approach taken to provide those seed inputs to farmers?
So, yeah, I think what we have done is unique and very interesting, but that also comes from this this majburi, that there were no seeds. There were no like great varieties existing. So it was not like our department wanted to go this way. Like this was a very conscious choice. This was the only way available to us, where
So there was no millet research institute.
there is Millet Research Institute, but they did not have enough seed to give. Like if I want to say today 10,000 farmers want your seed, they will, at that time, like in 2016, they did not have enough seed to give it to people. So
And they may not have had all the varieties of seed needed for all the different farmers and the different.
that much of demand supply was mismatch was there. Also, we wanted to make sure that because of that, adoption doesn't stop. So we asked farmer to use whatever seed they wanted to use, and simultaneously we created participatory varietal trials. Odisha Millet Mission is one of the scheme which had government, civil society, and academics, like all three as equal partners from the beginning itself. So the design of the program was very consultative.
Okay.
So every block had one NGO partner. And Vasan was at state level, but then every block had one FPO and one NGO partner. So it became very community driven that way also. So we asked everybody to collect land races and collect varieties which farmers had conserved or some places exist. And then those varieties were sown in some patches, 5 by 5, like all the varieties which were brought. And that place was called participatory varietal trial. So every block went through that. And then we brought farmers once varieties matured and asked them to pick and choose which of the varieties they prefer and why.
Okay.
And those varieties went into the purification, characterization, and then later seed production.
Okay.
And
You mentioned something called land races.
Huh.
What are they?
Before you have done them as anything which is variety, but then before the characterization has happened, when it comes,
So it's just growing, and it's sort of nobody has defined it.
nobody has defined it. Nobody knows all the full characteristics of that variety. Then till then we call it landrace. Then once the documentation is complete, then you call them some name and then you call them variety. If they're distinct.
So Ashima, you were saying that there are these different varieties that farmers or others give. How are these varieties different from each other?
I would say like there are characteristic differences in terms of their maturing time, the duration and height,
Okay.
and then yielding capacity, also the color. Like some have very dark color, some have milder color. There are also varieties which are white raggy kind of, those things. And then the panicle size, shape, like some are very closed, some are open, and some will have 5 fingers, some will have 7 fingers.
Oh, those are called panicles. Where the
The panicles, the panicles will have fingers.
Okay.
In ragi, that's how. And similarly, in other millet also, you'll have those are distinct characteristics. So,
And
and
how
at
would
least,
farmers choose? Like based on what?
so farmers will have criteria based on yielding is one. Some of them prefer closer because they'll be like, okay, like birds cannot eat or can eat those, or if more wind is there, then it will fall. Like the compact panicles will not, like the grains will not fall out. Those kind of things. The height of the plant itself, they'll have those as parameters for themselves, and then drought resistant.
Because they also provide straw or hay.
If they want straw or not, or also it will have like in cyclonic places, people will not prefer tall varieties because it will have tendency to fall. Once it is flat, then you can't do much about it.
Right.
So those kind of options, and then drought resistance, how many days it can survive dry spell and those kind of scenarios. Also for some farmers, it would be is it pest resistance? So majority of the millet is pest resistance, but then sometimes you can have blast kind of thing where like dot things are there. So those will be, and most of the time women farmers have preferred varieties. So the closed and open panicles will also be the processing required.
Okay.
How much you have to, how much time it will require you to knead it or thresh it. Those options, and then the taste of it, if the taste is good or not. So if they have seen those varieties and they have cooked it, they would know if the cooking time is less or more, if the flavor of that variety is good or bad, like that.
Okay. So, and rather than prescribing, saying here are 3 varieties or 2 varieties that you are again allowed farmers to choose what
Yes.
they want.
So we also asked them to list the criteria. We did not give them criteria. Like when they came, the field they used to be, you will be given ribbons of multiple colors, and then people will go and put their choices a ribbon like that, because a lot of farmers may not be able to write. And then we'll ask them why you put here, what you liked about this. So then those will be documented like that, and then we'll keep on doing it for all blocks. After 3 years, when you do the same repeat, you get the best character out because they are grown in the cross pollination has not happened, contamination has not happened. So those, then we presented it to government and said that there are like roughly 20 varieties which are very, very promising on various aspects, and farmers have preferred it, and they are distinct also. Many times a lot of when you get them as land races, they may not be very distinct. They may be a different version of the same thing but then available with farmer, and then got mixed it with other things and all that.
Right.
So those out of those 20, 4 became as released varieties, recognized released varieties in Odisha, and this all happened within Department of Agriculture.
Oh.
And then every seed bank will have those land races also, and then also farmers will come and say that next year I want 5 5 kg, 10 kg, whatever, and then intending will be done, and then people will grow that seed and then give it back to farmers.
Okay. And I remember an older conversation you said some of these varieties after characterization even like got names of the farmers who'd even submitted.
Or whatever farmers used to call.
Right.
And so there are like custodian farmers who have like conserved a lot of varieties. One of them is Raimati from Koraput. So she got she got recognized for all her work. But then some of the varieties, however they were being preferred. So Kalia is one variety, Mami is one variety, Mandya is another variety. So these are the varieties, however people were referring, that's the name was given to it.
Okay.
And then whichever farmer gave it to the department, that farmer was seen as the custodian or the farmers who preserved it, conserved it.
So fascinating in that. So you moved agronomic practices, you provided the seed, you provided other inputs, and all of this while retaining sort of farmer agency and choice as much as possible in program design while scaling up the program. So what happened after harvest? How did you promote the use of millets?
So in that also there are 3-4 things. One is making sure that local consumption increases. So we didn't wanted to have the system where farmers are growing millets, and then because millets are giving them better price, they sell off the whole thing.
Right.
So it was important for us to make sure that the houses which are growing in nearby places, so local consumption. And for that we created processing units within those panchayats. So smaller processing units for home consumptions in those panchayats, and then bigger processing units at certain cluster level. Along with that, created tiffin center kind of things at heart level or weekly hearts. Like, so Odisha still has weekly hearts where people will go and buy their basic things, sell their basic things. Like some people take their vegetables, sell in heart and buy some other things and come back home. So in those kind of
So
places.
these heart, when you say, isn't not the same as Delhi heart, right? Like, what I was like in Kannada, you call in village you call them santes or like these, like one day of a week when you have
Weekly
this.
bazaar,
Huh.
and there'll be a lot of places assigned those kind of places.
Okay.
And some places like between few panchayats you'll have 2-3.
Right.
Some place will have Sunday, then Thursday or something. So people will attend these huts, and we started creating tiffin centers and small SHG led food places in these huts.
So these are groups of women who you would train, who take
Ha.
this up as a small business.
Small business.
Hmm.
But then before business came itself, we started doing a lot of food festivals. In every village where people were growing, we were simultaneously doing food festivals. And those food festivals were bringing all the people of the community, men, women, everybody, with them trying multiple dishes, there cooking, and then asking them to eat it. And then there'll be posters or say for a small skit or something to engage people on benefits of millets, why you should consume, in the forms you can consume, engaging with children, school Anganwadi workers or Asha workers or school teachers and all, that how they understand it, what they should communicate to people. So we were simultaneously doing food festivals and creating market with SHGs.
Dear viewer, if you're liking the Well Lab show so far, you may also like the Water Data podcast with my colleague Veena Srinivasan. Veena is an award-winning water researcher and thinker and talks to some of the top minds in the world on everything water. You can find all episodes of the Water Data Podcast on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And I think what you're not yet sharing in this is that you have cooked and you have experimented with a lot of recipes on millets yourself, right? You and your colleagues.
Yes.
Uh,
One colleague.
one colleague. Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us a little about that. What did you cook? And I know that you've cooked for like 1,000 people sometimes
Yeah.
and crazy amounts. So tell us about what were you trying with ragi?
So not only ragi, with
No.
millets, like all kind of millets. So when we would do food festival, we would want people to get first come and see and feed. Like, so not all villages will have all millets. So like you were saying that you would find it hard to understand which millet is what. So we will put the unprocessed, like how panicle looks, how it looks after threshing, and how it looks after hulling. So
Okay.
all three of it together, give it to children and ask them to experiment. And then we'll say these are two items cooked by it. So sometimes, so we in some of the food festivals we'll do snack items like maybe how do you make pakoda out of it? How do you make like those chalu items just to get people's interest. Make cookies. So we'll take some cookies. Sometimes we'll bring SAGs and then say that okay, you cook here and then go back to your villages and share with people. But then we have created whole range of items. So what when we were doing these experiments, we wanted to try everything. How do you make khichdi? That's the easiest thing to do. And how do you make salad? Like so, for urban audience, we were doing that. Like how do if you make quinoa salad, you can make millet salad.
Right.
If you can make cookies, you can make breads, you can make breads like ragi sandwiches. We started giving that. In rural areas, we'll do pies, like kheer, because that becomes very popular thing between children. Like so, little millet or foxtail millet kheer, or ragi also like a sweet porridge kind of thing, or burfi kind of option of that. Like you make it
Yeah.
like a thick slurry and then ask people to have, or halwa options, those sweet items. Then in savory we
Also laddus, right?
also laddus. Laddus, yes.
Laddus are big, I think, right?
Laddus were very big. Ragi laddu, jawar laddu were very, very big options. And then we would do curd rice because that's also a very, like they have pokhal, which is like a panta bhat, like a fermented rice option. But then how can you do that the same thing with millets? And
Instead of rice.
instead of rice, and then do curd rice kind of options, lemon rice kind of options. Those are also something which people consume, or pulav. We've done biryani and all those options. So yeah, like
So
whole
it
range.
started with experimenting and then working with chefs, working with local cooks to create like standardized recipe books and so.
There are many recipe books which Millet Mission made. Like I think 3, 4 we made, and then so in that we did some which we experimented. We also collected whole set of recipes from people in terms of how they were consuming. So the whole nostalgia and history thing around that also, and then documented those bits also. We started creating videos out of it also, and in urban areas we were trying to experiment with local chefs. Like Bocca Cafe used to be a small cafe which had books, and it was a very popular thing between young people. So with their chefs, we created a whole continental menu out of millets. And then Mayfair was one place.
In Bhubaneswar. I
Bhubaneswar.
know it as a fairly upmarket
Yeah,
of five-star
it's-
hotel
yeah,
and like
it's
restaurant.
our hotel. So with them, we did a food festival for children once, and then we did 15 finance commission had come. So Shabnam and I had cooked 6 recipes.
Oh, you cooked at the Mayfair Hotel.
No, we cooked outside because there was some, like they did not have a spare place for us to cook, and then we brought the food inside Mayfair, and that was
And
Not-
you served it to guests in
Yes.
the.
yeah, all,
That
all
must have been
the
huge. I don't think
VIP.
large hotels allow that often. Or
Yeah, they don't. This was one of the things because I think like the secretary and the directors, they were like, no, we have to serve millet food, and then let Hashima and Shabnam cook and serve. And that was a big thing, yeah.
so tell us a few more stories like this. When you were cooking and others were cooking and serving these food, what were the reactions of people like? How did you buck that trend of, oh, this is poor people food, or this is like lower grade food, to like, hey, this is actually really good?
I think the first year was struggle. people will come, even if we give for free in like food festivals or exhibitions and all. Some people, like 50% people will just, do this, oh my god, disgusting, and go away, not even take. And kids will come and say that this is, birds food or something like that. But then when we started making all these banana muffins and all, I think that's where first time I felt a lot of people came forward and taste it, because it was looking good and appetizing. But yeah, I think one major thing we had to deal was that ragi is black. There. So I remember having like, like a little heated conversation with people also, that, oh, dark chocolate is nice, but but ragi is black, and then non palatable for you in some way, like, and to some people who were very very coming on me, and then if sometimes even I am tired because people interface is not my great skill set, I'll be like, that's racist. But yeah, like, but it took first year maybe like not a great response in some way, but then after 1 or 2 years, then people started recognizing us. Oh, you were there. I have like, so Odisha, Bhubaneswar has a big culture of doing a lot of art festivals and exhibitions and all that. So people will go in all of them, and then they started recognizing us, that I saw you there, I saw you there, I saw this stall earlier also. So that familiarity brought a little more, uh, I think, audience. And then after second year or third year, I think we started seeing that urban folks started looking for our stalls, like started trying to find and then buy.
Okay.
It became like that, that yes, I want to go there and then buy this.
And you would you like sell cooked food and also sell like
Ha.
whole grains or milled flour, such that
Yeah.
people like it and then they can buy it,
Yeah,
such that they can make
yeah, we would do
something.
both. We would sell cooked food also, and we'll sell these biscuits and those kind of options also. And we'll also sell grains, like if people want to buy that. I think the success came, like, okay, so I can actually say the Hockey World Cup in 2018.
Hmm.
That's where I think our success came, because in that we had put a stall, and then our ragi sandwich became the talk of, for people who were coming recurring time watching matches and all. Like word of the mouth, they started saying that, go this place and have sandwich, and so that time, first time I could collaborate with a baker who will supply us bread, because before that it was, we will bake. How much I'll bake in
No, you can't bake bread at scale.
yeah. So then when we collaborated with this person and then we trained their chef, uh, that's when they are able to supply us, like maybe like if we are ordering 10 loaves or 15 loaves, depending on loaf size, and uh, so then we were able to serve it to demand, like the demand and both matched in some way.
And in meanwhile, there were smaller successes and quicker successes in the circular economies in ragi growing areas.
Huh.
People were more receptive to
Huh.
having khichdi and kheer and
Yeah,
other.
yeah. And then also these things like you make basic namkeen out of it, murukku and those things which were savory, and then laddus and all. So all those items became very very popular in some way, and then cookies became very very popular. And we did a lot. Then we did whole range of cookies, like sweet and salty, and then premium, and then masses, all kind of things we did in that. And this baker who started providing us, who agreed to do the ragi bread, was also doing the cookies in some way. Because then once demand came, then we had somebody who was able to do it. Then we also started working with SHGs who had their own bakeries, and then those SHGs then started baking for us and then supplying.
So this is on the like private consumption driving a demand. How did you try plug? How did you plug this into government schemes where like rice and wheat are subsidized and sold at the ration shops, right? And people are entitled to buy a certain amount. How did that process start?
So all this we did simultaneously. Like 2017 was first time when program did production on ground. We worked with 8,000 farmers in 17, and in 18 we worked with 29,000 farmers. First year we did 3,000 in under improved agronomic practices. roughly 3,500, and then in 18
3,500 what?
hectares.
Okay.
And then in 18 we did 12,000 hectares, something like that. But then we made sure that we start procurement then and there. So we created the whole guideline for ragi procurement. We created a whole software system for procurement, and then we opened up mandis in all the places. So that year we bought only 18,000 quintals, which is
Mm.
nothing for government, like nothing. It's not even 0.000 something. But then we were sure if we don't start this year, and if we wait for production to go, say, for 30,000-40,000 hectares, it will not go until unless the procurement is happening. So that is when, because we did procurement in 2018, that is when we included it in PDS also.
Oh.
So the whole idea was whatever we will procure will go into PDS.
Hmm.
Now that quantity will divide what is the quantity going in PDS. Like the procurement quantity will divide. So first year it was just 1 kg one time to all household.
Okay. So instead of just giving rice, you substituted 1 kilo of rice going to a household.
Yeah.
Okay.
But then idea is
Hmm.
that you substitute 25% of rice. Odisha doesn't take wheat so much, so wheat is not negligible for them. But you substitute 25% of people's consumption with millets. So if some household is consuming 20 kgs of rice, then you say that okay, 4 kg of millet.
Ah.
That's a decent start. And if that happens at every household level, you will shoot up a lot of millet demand, and supply will be like also like, so both itself is huge. So that is where we started. If each house gets 1 kg every month, each person like 5 kg ration it's given to them, you replicate 1 kg.
Okay.
But it has not happened because from 18,000 quintals, now we are procuring. The last year they procured 7.5 lakh quintal.
Oh, wow. So you're saying that the program in terms of production then scaled, like, I don't know how many times is that, but
Yeah.
uh,
Even
50
production.
times or
Huh.
something
Yeah,
crazy like that.
production also from 3,000 hectares, 3,500 hectares to last year I think 1,48,000 hectares.
Oh, wow.
And then procurement also 18,000 quintals to now 7.5 lakh
Like,
quintal. Yeah,
okay. So it's still small, say, perhaps compared to how much rice is grown in.
obviously.
Right. But it is now meaningful, significant,
Yeah.
and it's a significant chunk of what people eat in Odisha now at
Yes,
scale.
yes. And it is decent enough in terms of as an alternative because it's large. Like 2.5 lakh farmers are engaged with it. That's not a small amount, like small number. Uh, so that's when it got in PDS. So every year, based on the quantity procured,
Hmm.
they will divide how many months it will be able to replicate that 25%. It's like
Right.
that.
Okay.
That's
And so the government procurement happened with like a minimum support price.
Hmm.
So did the minimum support price, I know that the dynamics are different in different places. Did it act like a price ceiling or like a price floor, that this is the minimum price at which it's bought, or it at least provided like a
in
reference
grains
price?
it is ceiling.
See.
Even in rice it is ceiling, except maybe basmati. All other rice is procured at the minimum support price only
Or below.
or below. So and ragi gives very good price. I think when we started, it was 1,900 rupees per kg per quintal.
Okay.
I think now it's 4,000.
Okay.
So because government also wanted to provide it as an lucrative option in comparison to rice, then if you now compare ragi's income,
Hmm.
and like Odisha is still very low in comparison to yield. Income, like if you see Andhra or other places or even Karnataka, because
On
of
rice.
like rice and millets, all of it. I'll give you another figure. When we started, the average yield per hectare in Odisha for ragi was 5 quintals.
Hmm.
On an average now, it is 18-19 quintal.
Oh, wow.
So, which is when there is no chemical, no high yielding varieties. Uh, like those are bigger factors for yield. change. So in that scenario also, this is what is right now. And a family will consume maybe 1 quintal or 2 quintals, and then you sell 15 quintals and 4,200 rupees or whatever. It is decent amount of money for a person to from like 1.5 acre land or something like that. Why I would say it is a viable option for a farmer, and then it's big enough for as an alternative for them in comparison to rice in Odisha.
Okay. No, so the numbers you show and the way it's scaled from almost nothing to the scale it's gone to is incredible. The sort of last train of thought that I want to explore in today's conversation is, so you were working first of all not in government directly in the beginning, but you were working with the organization called Vasan, and then Vasan partnered with the Odisha government and you created like a program management unit within the government, which was to run the mission. So how did this entire program get sold within government such that then it was owned by government, and this was not a NGO's program, right? This was Odisha government's program. So what, any insights from that process, any stories of how that embedded within the, because governments are famously resistant to change, they have certain ways of working, and you're saying, okay, we'll do all these things with farmer agency choice. In agri department, which focuses on yield, we'll focus on consumption. How did that journey go?
So I think that's where this whole complicated design, where civil society, government, and academia, all three were partners. So there's a think tank called Nabhakrishna Chaudhary Center for Development Studies in Orissa, which is government of Orissa's think tank. So they were also research partners. And mm, so because this got established like that, and there were few officers who were very, very supportive of this trial itself, that we want to work beyond what we have done so far. And I think their conviction of okay, I want this to work, gave space to like person like me to operate inside. Like I'm sitting inside Kushi Bhavan and getting all this done was obviously there. But then also a lot of work at our end in terms of, for like, if we are coordinating with 9-10 departments, then we are doing their work for them to see value in some process, and actually own up that. So initial few years were very, very hard that ways. And we also saw a lot of backlash because of the flexibilities we had built in program. Nobody will sign on it. Nobody wants to take, like, bureaucracy is very, very notorious. Where is the precedence? If this has not happened in past, I am not going to approve it, because if any backfire happens, I am the one who will be
Right.
my neck will be on the board. So I don't
This is
want
the
to.
old bureaucratic thing of we should be the best at something and we should be first at something. Then you try to do something new and like, okay, show me the precedent of who's done it before.
Yeah.
And how do you do
How
something
do you
new?
do so? Yeah. So that is what was in some way like a puzzle. And then uh, I would also say we worked like on behalf of everybody, and then gave them in a way that, okay, here is it is, please, and in that way. And then I think first year, like the first 1.5 year, the hard work which brought certain results on ground, because initially a lot of people, except few officers who were very, very supportive, everybody else was like, this is a platform for failure. Everybody was sitting on the fence and thinking that this is going to fail. But then when that didn't happen, then a lot of buying came from all places. From so another thing to say, that we started with 7 district 30 blocks, and now we are 30 districts 177 blocks, and every year 20-30 blocks and few districts were added based on demand. I think a lot of demand also, like uh, from farmers, from community organizations, from MLAs, MPs, writing to state saying that I want this program. Why are you not adding my block? District collectors writing to secretary saying that I want my district to be added in this. I want to also promote millets and also that
So
is how.
there was a culture where people wanted to be inside the mission, inside the
Yeah,
program.
yeah. Everybody wanted some pie for it, and
And even within government, that people have to eat some laddus or eat some of the to serve
Ah.
that, this is actually good.
yes, I think laddus, ragi laddus, yes.
Okay.
And then when we included ragi laddu in ICDS,
So this is in Anganwadis, like so for children.
for children. Yeah.
Okay. And that was a success?
Yes, so there are two districts from district mineral funds. We provide ragi laddu every day to Anganwadi, all Anganwadis, all children
Okay.
get every day one ragi laddu.
And I think you also try and include it in midday meals in any way?
We did pilots of midday meals. So midday meals, because they are rice based, like there has to be a full meal. Ragi was not very suitable. One, because roti making culture is not there, and porridge,
More labor, right?
more labor. Cooks will just protest against you if you increase their labor like that. And porridge is not very popular between children. They are not going to eat porridge. If you make any kind of that item as a option. We tried with, and little millet and foxtail millet are the most suitable to replicate rice, to replace rice with any options. Like with egg curry, you can give them as a pulao kind of options. And we did multiple options like khichdi, pulao, and all those things, and they were all very well received. There's a huge demand from children, from cooks, and with teachers. Everybody accepted it. But the problem is little millet and foxtail millet don't have minimum support price yet, and other is the losses in processing are huge. So the pricing of providing it in 1 rupee requires a very big subsidy.
Oh, every government meal has to cost average just 1 rupee.
No. The rice has to come 1 rupee
Okay.
kg.
And the
Because rice
overall cost of that meal is actually very
even 10,
Ah,
8
right.
rupees, 9 rupees, something like that. But
So that economics didn't quite work.
yeah. So, but then all pilots were very successful. Only that bit I think is still pending. We did a whole process of coming at a minimum support price, benchmarking price in Odisha. I think that by the time I moved, we had a procurement guideline for little millet and foxtail millet, like for minor millets. But it requires a different kind of budgeting exercise at government level to subsidize little millet or foxtail millet in midday meals.
Okay. But Ashuma, this has been absolutely wonderful. And that, like, I think at Well Labs, we, across our program, even your team, we're talking about systems transformation, right? That we want to transform how, say, a canal irrigated region even does agriculture, and or how we do integrated water management in some other case. I think the story you've shared of the Odisha Millet Mission is really, really powerful and important in how it's not about having one intervention that you do inexpensively at scale, but if you really want to transform systems, you need to move all things in parallel and simultaneously.
Yeah.
Where you move how people eat, you move how things get into government distribution systems, just improve productivity, get more farmers to grow. So the story that you tell, I think we need to hear more of the story. Hopefully, we will in subsequent discussions. And thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Well Labs Show. Don't forget to subscribe to the Well Labs YouTube channel and share this episode with your friends and colleagues. Until next time.